There were a multitude of failings from government agencies, but in your view, what went wrong?
Well, Chris, look, I think, yes, I totally agree. There was a multitude of failings from various government agencies, and I think it's a combined effort of failure between the New Zealand Intelligence Service and also the police, because the fact is that this terrorist was on our radar in 2016, and then we did absolutely nothing to try and keep our New Zealand community, our society as a whole, safe. The intelligence service and police have both failed us New Zealanders, and unfortunately it has resulted in 7 people with injuries, and I'm just grateful that no one suffered anything more than what they're currently suffering. This could have been far worse than what happened.
Immigration officials sought to revoke his refugee status in 2018, but he appealed and a final decision had yet to be made on whether he could be deported. Not only was he in limbo, but New Zealand's safety was also at risk once he was released from prison. What do you make of the long timeline that was released by the Prime Minister last night?
Well, I think, this is what baffles me. In 2016, he was first made aware to the police the fact that he was posting things on his Facebook which could potentially pose a threat to New Zealand and our national security. There was a 2-year gap between him coming to police attention and then immigration doing something in terms of trying to act to revoke his refugee status. Now, the question needs to be asked, Chris, what did we do in the 2 years? Why wait for 2 years? Because, in that 2-year period, the terrorist also tried to fly to Syria. So, you've not only got him posting things on Facebook, because one can say a mere post on Facebook is one thing, and it doesn't really amount to a threat to national security. But here you've got an individual that's actually actively trying to go to Syria. And not only that, he was stopped at the border. He was arrested at our airport with a one-way ticket out of here. That really does show that he posed a significant risk to New Zealand's safety. And the other thing is, he was then allowed to come back into the community, especially after March 15, 2019. The fact is, he could have used his hate and extremist views to influence others as well. And it's just baffling and unfathomable that there was a 2-year gap, because had we nipped this in the butt in 2016, his appeal process could have started then, and we could have reached a decision by now, and this attack would have been stopped.
It is interesting to hear also that several mosques in Auckland refused to take him in, knowing that he was disturbed.
Oh, absolutely. Look, the fact is, his disturbed mental state was actually brought to the authorities at the time that he applied for his refugee status, because if you read the decision, which I presume is the decision for him, which you've read and I've read, there's stuff in there that the psychological report and everything else, and there's ample evidence to say that he had exposure to terrorist activities while in Sri Lanka, given the connection to the LTTE and so on and so forth through his family members. But even at that point, our authorities, the Refugee Status Board, and whoever involved in him being able to stay in New Zealand could have put him into some psychological therapy or counselling, which would have stopped him from carrying out these attacks. And at that point, had his extremist and views of hatred been identified, they could have done something there and stopped it right there and then, as early as 2013.
It's not like there was not evidence to support what he was going to do. His claim to asylum, of course, was supported by a psychologist's report, which you and I have both seen, which said he presented as a highly distressed and damaged young man suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. Therefore, if that was the diagnosis, Why was he not put into a secure mental facility straight away?
Well, I think the simple answer is that in New Zealand we have numerous gaps in our law. And unfortunately, that has led to certain events like, March 15, we could have done something there with, having the law. If the law was as up to date as we would have hoped, things could have caught up there. In this case, we've got issues with immigration laws not being up there. The Prime Minister said the other day that, laws are reactive and we can't really do much apart from react to events that happen. But, in this modern world where we have seen examples of terrorism overseas, I think our lawmakers have simply failed us. Our lawmakers have failed New Zealand because we have seen examples of hate and extremist views and what they can do to societies. And had we taken those as examples and implemented laws and pushed them through into our society, we would be in a safer position. I can't say whether or not he could have been placed in a secure mental facility, but there could have been things that could have been done that would have been able to identify the fact that he was disturbed and he was depraved, because unfortunately his views of hate and extremism are depraved views, and majority of New Zealand citizens, whether they're Muslim, whether they're Christian, we don't hold those views because we are a peaceful nation.
The Prime Minister said she had met with officials and, quote, expressed my concern that the law could allow someone to remain here who obtained their immigration status fraudulently and who posed a threat to our national security. She's right about that. What is your response?
Well, look, expressing one's concern is one thing, and then actively doing something is totally a separate ballgame. The fact is, after March 15, we saw how swiftly the Prime Minister acted and implemented the gun buyback and whatnot. I just simply don't understand how, when she was briefed on this particular individual, right from the time she took office as Prime Minister, she and her ministers did nothing but accept briefings, and there's nothing concrete to show that they've done something. We could have passed laws under urgency that could have mitigated what happened here. We could have done all that, but unfortunately, that's not enough. Saying you express concern that the law could allow someone to stay here fraudulently due to the immigration status or someone that poses a threat, that really doesn't cut it when you've got 7 New Zealand citizens or residents who have now suffered at the hands of this terrorist. And not only those 7 individuals, you've got those 7 individuals' families, this community, the New Zealand community as a whole, they are all suffering. And, it's ridiculous in my opinion.
Do you worry about a backlash against the wider Muslim community, or in fact genuine refugees who are thankful and grateful to be here in New Zealand?
Well, look, Chris, the fact is that, level-headed people like you and I, if the entire community and society was made up of people like you and I who are level-headed, then there would be no backlash. But unfortunately, we do have a few rotten apples in our community, and there may be backlash. I'm not too sure. And yes, some people are worried about the backlash, and not only the Muslim community, but also the refugee community as well, because, these people have had such difficult lives in their home countries, and they've done so much to try and get into New Zealand. And then you've got one individual, one terrorist with views of hatred and extremism who has ruined it for the rest. And yes, it is a possibility that backlash can happen. And I just feel sorry for those individuals who may face the backlash.